Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 113 of the Live Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Feels like it's been a few weeks since I recorded. I had a bunch stacked up. And I mean, anybody listening knows that I'm always amped up for discussions with my guests. I never want to say like, oh, I'm extra excited for this person because it makes everybody else feel like they're not special. But I am really genuinely excited about talking with Dr. Dwayne Jackson, who, well, I'll start here. So you've got some serious education in your background, right? And I mean, I'm just going to get the surface level stuff. I mean, a PhD in neuromuscular physiology, and you were a tenured professor of medical biophysics. I'm reading shit off here. I wrote down because I didn't want to screw this up. At Western University, there's a whole bunch more. And you were doing award-winning research there, but now you've kind of moved over into the fitness industry. You're focused on education here, primarily with Prescript and Team HD, that's Dorian Hamilton stuff. And this is kind of cool too. So you're part of both Jordan Shallow's team and you're close friends with my pal, Don Saladino. We're both speaking at Kabuki Education Week coming up, which we're going to shout out. That's like when we release this, I think it's like the start of that week. And we're both speaking in Las Vegas at the Real Coaches Summit in March 6th and 7th. And we both were just published in a Muscle and Fitness special edition that for the Olympia. So like we've just been like crisscrossed really closely. So it was really cool timing to actually have you on. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a small industry, isn't it? We think it's large, but it really isn't. There's just, a couple handfuls of key players or a few hundred key players, and then you just keep on crossing paths as you kind of meander through this journey.
Well, I can say Don is a really key player. He's a great guy, one of my favorite people. He was on recently. Anybody listening, go back and listen to that episode. And again, we were talking off air. It's like, when Don has someone that he highly recommends because he's raving about you to me when we were in Vegas together. And I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, yeah, I got to get you to meet my guy, Dwayne. Right. So that was
Well, the
enough.
feeling's mutual because Andrew, he didn't stop raving about you either the whole time. Every time I talked to him, so he's a great connector of great people. So I really appreciate the connection. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, we're now connecting all of my listeners with you so they can dive into more of your stuff. So let's plumb the depths of that. Obviously, a lot of your education is around nutrition. So I kind of open it up and I'll let you go where you want with this. But we know that nutrition in the fitness industry, this is a tribal ideological battleground a lot of the time. And we know that people get kind of carried away with the exciting and promising research. So what's sort of exciting for you? What actually has promise? And it seems to be sort of a solid research back on the cutting edge of stuff. And then maybe on the flip side of it, are there things that we're hearing about that, that kind of the coaches grab onto because maybe the talking heads are going on about it. And it's really more hype and marketing than it is substance.
Yeah. So in terms of what's exciting, I think people are starting to at least start to understand that nutrition involves a lot more than the macronutrients. And that's something that I've been pushing for decades. Right currently though, the problem is in contrast to this, a lot of the influencers, if you will, gravitate toward these, fad diets, for lack of a better term, which tend to focus on individual macronutrients and actually completely, have disregard for micronutrition. So, and we can name a couple of these. We have our carnivore diets that work very well for people with gut health issues because they can't ferment those fibers that are really good for our guts and brain, right?
I
So
like I like to explain that carnivore dieting is really hypoallergenic. So anybody who has almost like any sort of goofy intolerance, they feel better. And therefore they think, okay, they falsely equate this. Well, this is obviously better for me and for everyone. There's clearly no consequences whatsoever of doing this long term.
yeah, it's funny too, Andrew, because what's neat about that concept of because I removed everything from my diet except for these meats and whatnot, I feel better. That should be the first indicator that you need to repair your gut health. And where the problem comes in with these relatively high protein, high fat diets that don't have any sort of, I call them buffering agents, like, high quality polyunsaturated fats, high quality fibers. When we take those out, those are the things we tend to become sensitive to. So for example, the FODMAPs. So everybody's on these, low fermentable carbohydrate diets because they make their tummies feel better. But that doesn't mean that the FODMAP foods are bad. In fact, FODMAP foods are the ones that feed our microbiota and make them diverse and very, very robust. So when we engage in these really extreme elimination diets, of course you're going to feel better. Like you said, we got rid of the foods that cause people most sensitivities, but really that should be the indicator that no, these foods actually aren't poison. We have lots of data that show that fibers and fruits and vegetables aren't poisonous, but in fact I can't digest them, and that's kind of where I've been really standing on my platform. And a lot of my work that I do now for athletes is literally unscrewing their gut health from high protein, low micronutrient diets.
And, so what do you think about the push, maybe 10, 15 years ago towards the if it fits your macros mentality, which I've always thought, it's a bit of a straw man where people demonize it because it, of course, creates this false dichotomy between, quote, clean eating and if it fits your macros. Because I really don't think anybody is trying to put as many pepperoni sticks and Pop-Tarts together as possible to make up the optimal macronutrient intake and just say, fuck the quality of the food. But do you think that there's something within that flexible dieting, if it fits your macros sort of ethos, that what's valuable and then are there any flaws in it?
Yeah. So it's funny because really at the end of the day, when we think from a physics perspective, what fits your macros should work out quite well. And they do. But where the problem comes in a lot of times is the coaching of those people who you're teaching how to, have these flexible macro focused diets on what foods to choose. Because humans tend to be generally, a little lazy. And, our default is lazy. So preparing foods becomes a difficulty for a lot of people just because they decide not to. Then they start doing the old grab, yourself, and let's just use McDonald's for an example. Grab yourself an egg McMuffin for breakfast. Now, if you look at that from a macro perspective, it's probably not too bad. But where the problem comes in a lot of these, I guess, very, very easy foods to acquire, if you will. The problem with them is they're very, very macro dense, but they're very, very low in micronutrition. And we know this quite well. And that's why we see in obesity, these people that have an overabundance of caloric intake, but they have a very, very low micronutrient intake. And this exacerbates any issues with metabolic problems and this kind of stuff.
That actually makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of stuff here that we can play with. Let's go back into the gut health stuff. So, gut health, one of my favorite resources on gut health is Dr. Gabrielle Fundaro. She's been on the podcast before. And Gabby's pretty clear on saying like a lot of the stuff that gets claimed out there is probably a little more speculative and we really don't necessarily know a lot. And I know that the science is advancing. So what are the things that we're hearing, obviously through social media that tends to be a little overblown, that we're not comfortable saying for sure yet this is a thing? What's emerging? What do you feel more confident about? And honestly, how can people approach both learning more about gut health, but also improving their gut health and the gut health of their clients?
Yeah. So generally the kind of the misconception is that, depression and all these issues are caused by poor gut health. We do know when we look at biopsychosocial models of health in general and nutrition, that there are a number of different elements that kind of feed into the issues that we have with gut health. A lot of it has to do with how you picked your parents and how you were born and whether you were breastfed or not. A lot of it also has to do with, did you grow up, especially in the US, this is an issue, but did you grow up in kind of the inner city or did you grow up in the country? Also, it depends on where you live in the world. So the actual idea of gut health being the be all end all for solving, depressive problems and these kind of things, not necessarily, because we do know people that grow up in low income houses, who were born maybe of cesarean of birth and weren't breastfed, are going to be set up poorly for gut health down the road. We do know that, but we actually don't know whether or not that outcome means this person's going to have these, depressive issues or any of this stuff, because like I said, it's a biopsychosocial thing that food is a very, very personalized thing. Nutrition is personalized.
And this is an anecdote, but I mean, I can think about me personally. I grew up in rural Newfoundland. We were out playing in dirt constantly. Grew up with dogs at a young age. I didn't grow up on a farm per se, but there was other animals around. My grandfather was a fisherman and a trapper, so we got wild caught game and fish and birds. My mom and dad, just by virtue, it's not like they'd studied, the nutritional science of the modern day, but it was a lot of home cooked meals. I think we ended up with a little bit of bologna back in the day. I don't touch the stuff now. Newfie steak. We'll see what Shallow thinks about that. He was pretty young when he moved away, but he'd know. And so when I hear these things, I look at it and I go, all right, well, I actually seem to check all these good boxes growing up in this environment. And I rarely, if anything, have any sort of like gut health issues or intolerances to anything. I can eat virtually anything I want, right? Bananas, for some reason, give me a bit of heartburn. So I tend to avoid those. That's literally the only thing that I don't mess with. And otherwise, gluten is not a problem. Dairy is not a problem. I just got into the habit of drinking milk a long time ago because the only thing I was having it with was cereal. And I love my Lucky Charms for that fuss about that graphic with Rogan. And I mean, there's extremes on both ends. I think there's some middle ground on that one. I'm not even going to get hell. You know what? You can say what you want about that whole like steak versus Lucky Charms thing. But it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, this is a really great treat, but I actually would rather allocate my like calories elsewhere. So I just got out of the habit. And otherwise, I'm wasting milk in the fridge. So I just stopped having it. You know what? Tell you what. Let's do that whole thing. Let's do that graphic that Rogan shared about this. I don't even know what it was. I think it was an American governmental thing. There was some misinformation about it. What it actually was. The graphic was the study was actually, I guess, some sort of criticism of this thing, and it's not meant to compare food groups. So of course, Rogan shares this graphic that, I mean, even I liked it, but I mean, I don't go too deep in these things because I know they're always polarized. And then there's the counter reaction that's calling out the misinformation of Rogan's post. And then I saw that, and there's friends of mine, I think really smart people. And I look at them, I'm like, well, I think you guys are missing the point here too. And to me, it seemed like there's a middle ground. And I think there's an obvious flaw with sort of trend with what we're hearing now, this push away from hell meat. I mean, again, people like to freak out about Bill Gates and, the price of eggs. And there's this egg farm that just burned down, and it feeds into the conspiracy theorist side of stuff. But all this push for all these like plant-based meats and what have you, I don't know, like have fun with that, like the graphic and anything along those lines.
Yeah. Okay. So first off, I'm going to preempt this one with, and keep me on track here because I have a habit of like driving all over the place with my thoughts. But we first of all, as North Americans, we kind of rule a lot of the social media space, and so one of the big issues I see with meat. So I'm going to give a couple counters. Us pushing meat, grass-fed meat, you should be eating this, eating organic, these kind of things. Those are great things for people that live in very, very rich nations. So when we're speaking to the world, which we are, and we're influencing the world, we need to actually also consider the fact that we're talking to people that live in Jamaica, for example, or people that live in maybe even Cuba. And when we start to use these extremes to look at them, really, a lot of times, if you can get your hands on meat, you're doing really, really well. So first off, like meat is the way we get to choose in North America. Like, oh, well, I'm a vegan. Oh, yeah, well, you want to know what? I'm a carnivore. That is a very, very first world issue. Starve anybody, and they'll eat whatever's on their frigging plate. Okay, so right off the bat, when we start to talk about this stuff, this is kind of rich people stuff when we're deciding, on who gets to eat what and what's most important. In terms of vegan versus carnivore, so I'm going to go full extremes on each side. Really, at the end of the day, in terms of the impact on global warming and all this kind of stuff, it's really, really moot because being able to truck all those vegetables around in the wintertime up here to Canada gets really, really expensive. And I'm sure there's counter arguments to all this, but really at the end of the day, when you're talking about eating when you're young in Newfoundland, or when I was eating, in the 70s in Ontario, we ate seasonal vegetables, right? So we moved with the times because those were the foods that were available to us. And what's interesting is when you do that, it's actually, if you want to go on the kind of nomadic train where you're like, yeah, well, back when we were cavemen, that's how you did it. And, that's how we evolved. But on the other side of the coin, when we talk about health and longevity, we do, in my camp, we do require vegetable matter in our diet, because it's just part of mixing up that variety so that you can, feed everything in your guts and get all the micronutrition you require to keep your cells all happy and everything like that. So really, at the end of the day, when it comes to like arguments against and for different diets, different foods, they're tools, man. We're lucky that we actually have access to the ingredients for those tools. So do I use ketogenic diets in my clients? Absolutely. There's a number of different types of clients that I use 70% fat diets, true clinical ketogenic diets. Do I use Mediterranean diets, true Mediterranean diets, low protein, high in the nuts and the fibers? Absolutely. There's certain cohorts of people that it's very, very important for. Kidney transplant, people like myself, I have a kidney transplant. Following a Mediterranean style diet is a much, much more healthy way to treat your kidneys than, say, just a pure high protein, high fat diet, and just strictly because of all the metabolites that your kidneys have to deal with. So really, at the end of the day, I don't take a camp. I don't use any camp, to be honest. I try to push people eventually toward a diet that's mixed. And I'd love to see everybody be able to start out on a diet that's 33%, protein, 30% carb, 33% fat, so that we can play around and move around with it. But some people just can't handle that level of carbohydrate because they've got, insulin insensitivities or glucose intolerances. Some people can't handle high fat diets because they just don't produce enough, say, lipase, or maybe their stomach isn't acidic enough, or maybe they don't have enough, bile salts on board to kind of, be able to mobilize those fats. So at the end of the day, if you take a non-biased view on diet, you win as a coach. You completely win because you're not stuck in this stupid pigeonhole that you have to emotionally support. You can be like, yeah, man, good on you. You're doing a keto diet. Is it working for you? Excellent. You feel good? Good. Blood works great. Wicked. That works for you. Awesome. You're using a high carbohydrate, carb cycling diet with, some keto in there and it works for you. Super duper. That works awesome. But as you have all those tools at your disposal, then you actually can start working magic with your clients, because you're no longer putting everybody on this one religious, diet that you've chosen because you have some sort of emotional attachment to this thing. And it's like anything in life, emotional attachment to anything is kind of the death of common sense. How's that?
That's a way better answer than even what I asked, right? So I don't know if you have any specific thoughts on the argument about that Rogan graphic per se, but what you just said is probably one of the most valuable things that everybody listening can take from any episode I've ever recorded. So that's perfect.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, to be honest, I don't really know the graphic that well.
Okay.
Can you kind of describe it a little bit?
So I guess I should probably pull it up. So guys,
Yeah, pull it up so everybody can kind of
listening, just bear with me a little bit. So I got to find this on social media, and Instagram search function is not what it used to be. So let's see if it's still on here. Okay. So Rogan shared this new government funded quote food pyramid end quote says Lucky Charms are healthier than steak. Of course, Instagram's put its little red missing context. Independent fact checkers say information in this post could mislead people. And let's see. So what else is there? And it shows this graphic of these foods compared. Watermelon, kale, frosted mini wheats are way at the top. And that's a red flag right there. Unsweetened almond milk, which I think also gets people twisted. Non-fat frozen yogurt, chocolate covered almonds, all green at the top. And then as it goes down, it gets in Honey Nut Cheerios, still green. And then sweet potato fries or chips. Then it goes millet, egg substitute fried in vegetable oil, skinless chicken breast, Lucky Charms, whole wheat bread, canned pineapple and heavy syrup, boiled or poached egg, whole milk, almond M&Ms, non-fat mozzarella cheese, ice cream, whole egg fried in butter, cheddar cheese, ground beef at the bottom. And it's presented in this manner as if these things are all compared to each other, which the critics of this post say that's not how it was intended, and that foods are compared within their own categories. So I think it's obvious that the graphic itself is a bit misleading, because apparently where the graphic was taken from was actually something that was criticizing problems with this. And people are saying this was a government endorsed, pushed sort of thing, when in fact it was just this thing. I can't remember exactly, but I know the government was somehow involved, but I don't think it was an official, hey, here's the food guide, right? The Canadian food guide. but for Americans. And then the flip side, I saw some people, really smart people, kind of went in and they just went full on the other contrarian end, very technical in the research base. But I think the middle ground is the fact that, which is what the original thing that Rogan grabbed onto was saying, is there's sort of a flaw here where within this thing, they're basically saying certain foods, they're demonizing certain foods like beef and eggs, and then they're suggesting that something like frosted mini wheats are like off the charts healthy. So I guess if you're not super familiar with it, it's probably hard to give a nuanced response to something I just read out to you. I think it requires a little bit more in depth. But for anybody listening, hopefully this whole conversation just points people to not taking these ideological hard lines about these things and actually approaching it with, from an evidence base, but also the nuance to look at, okay, there's obviously problems with this thing. There's definitely problems. The way that Rogan and that camp spun it, and I'm not a Rogan critic. People get really twisted up about guys like Rogan and Musk or whatever. It's like, okay, I don't live my life through the lens of like being enraged constantly by what people like this are doing, right? It's like, all right, but this particular thing, okay, cool. I think there's some missing context. That's fair. I think it's being shared to get one ideological tribe kind of wound up, and then another, the opposite side, is going to fight about it.
That's
And
exactly what happened, Andrew. In fact, I remember the post, and it's funny because I don't take, it's clickbait, right?
Yeah.
I don't take sensationalism. I don't even actually engage in it because it raises my ego and gets me frustrated. And so it's funny because I remember seeing that and thinking this has probably been taken right out of context. But see, the issue is with a lot of these food pyramids and everything else that gets designed is it's designed around what's available to the masses, right? And so when they start producing these things as a government agency, they are purely produced based on what we have available to us in the country that we live in, and how that can be distributed kind of on a distributed properly. How's that? That's how they look at it. The point is, though, the actual overriding point of this whole thing, without me having deep context into this post, is that there's a lot of people distilling what they want out of scientific research that gets used to their advantage. And it's funny because a lot of the most sensational people that are, on the other side of things, like Rogan and them, tend to pick on people who cherry pick, if you will, studies, but then they utilize them and then manipulate them. And so for me, really, there's a lot of people that are claiming to be experts in areas that actually have just kind of dabbled in that area, and they just have a lot of influence. And I have a big issue with that, being an academic myself, lifelong academic. So and that's where I kind of draw the line when Rogan starts making his claims.
And obviously, there's a lot of people out there who don't have these academic backgrounds, but what you also alluded to, and I'll give an example. I don't want to be too critical. I talked about this a while back with Dr. Mike Israetel, who had a really good nuanced explanation for this. But you get people like Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who, doctor, credentialed, but seems to wander so far afield, widely outside of her area of expertise. And a lot of the time, is certainly bought into mainstream influence and appeal. Definitely going on with Huberman too. Huberman's definitely doing it. And they're usually stronger in their area of direct expertise. And then sometimes when they step widely outside of it, people just need to be alert to the fact that they have no greater expertise in that area, even though they're a doctor of something, than almost anyone else, I suppose, in a way of saying it. It depends on just how much they've studied it, but it just does not mean automatically that they are of doctorate level expertise in all of these areas. Everything. Nobody has that kind of breadth of knowledge. So I tend to be a natural skeptic with this stuff, and I like the nuanced answer, and I actually really like it. I hope the takeaway here for everybody is we just kind of have to look at this as not everybody has these ideal circumstances where they have all these choices. In a lot of cases, there are people, the environments that they're in, they simply don't have that much choice, and they're just doing the best they can, which I think fitness professionals kind of get lost on this a lot, where they'll fight these ideological battles. They'll fight these little tribal training and nutrition ideologies within our world. And at the end of the day, you've got this person just sitting there going, I just want to feel better. I just want help. I just don't want to feel tired anymore. I don't want to feel sick anymore. I'm confused. There's too much info out there. Can somebody please just fucking help me? I'm desperate, right? that's the person that matters. And that's actually what I hope coaches will start to remember when we start seeing these things. I try to stay out of internet arguments, or I just won't even go near this stuff. Because I didn't even know too much. I just kept getting bits and bits of it. And I see the counter posts and I'm like, I understand the evidence in these counter posts, but I also think these are also ideal, like they're run through an ideological filter as well, the opposite side of it.
100%.
Let's go over to something else I think will be really valuable. You've done a lot of leading work on chronic stress, its impact on immunity. I'm reading off shit again. Inflammation, mental health in diseases like cancer, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. And these are populations we're dealing with more and more. And we see a lot of people talk about the stuff online. Is there anything really important that you want coaches to know about that would be helpful in dealing with clients who struggle with these issues?
Yes. So there's a couple things. So first of all, as a coach, remember to know what your your boundaries are. Okay, so stay in your lane. If you have someone that comes to you that has a disease that you don't know how to deal with, then by all means refer them to someone that does know how to deal with them and truly knows how to deal with them. That's the first thing, because I end up, for some reason, I end up getting all those people that have tried everything else, and now they're super duper, they're in dire straits when they get to me. And I see it, and I look at the diets they're on, I look at everything else they're on. It's obvious that, some of these people didn't actually have a clue what this person was going through in a physiological sense. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is, and actually this is what I'm speaking with at the Real Coaches Summit about. I actually don't know the topics yet, but this is the area I'm going to talk about, is let data drive your decision making when you're dealing with special populations. And what I mean by that is both their own anecdotes, that can be data from them, but also blood work, any sort of biometrics you have, blood pressure. All these things become really, really important, and more important as we get into more clinical and subclinical populations. So the people that we're talking about, with cancer, or maybe they had a transplant, or maybe they've got kidney disease or heart disease, and you're working with them, because there's a lot of help you can give them. There's a lot of hindrance you can give them if you don't apply the right knowledge to it. So that would be my first, piece of advice in terms of, how to approach these special populations. Also, there's another issue I see in a lot of coaches with their these special populations. So generally, people come to me when they haven't got the right answers from their physician. And so, there's a big, with everything that's gone on with COVID and all the weird polar stuff that happened with all the, in the US with Pfizer versus the government versus the people versus all this stuff. People have lack of confidence in our medical system and how things work. So if you have a good physician that's even going to give you shit for, certain aspects of your lifestyle, they're still testing you. Let them test you. Let them get your MRIs. Let you get the blood work. You're getting all this stuff done, by someone who actually cares. So if you can kind of have a good relationship, or promote a good relationship as a coach with the physician, then you're going to get a lot more of that data that I talked about at the beginning of this little chat. So really, at the end of the day, making friends with the physicians is great. The reason why a lot of people come to me is because I've danced on both sides of the coin. Having been a tenured professor at Western University Medicine, and being the undergraduate chair of medical biophysics, I've trained a lot of physicians. I'm also a microsurgeon, so I've trained a lot of physicians with their hands, and I know a lot of people with golden hands. When I left academia a year ago to pursue things outside of the medical spectrum, that really gave me a leg up, because then people are like, "Oh, this is wicked. This guy's actually lived the life of a pro athlete, and had all the damages that those athletics do to him, but he's also got this medical background, that he's worked in medicine for this long with these people, training them." So for me, I'm unique, and I promote a lot of things, but just the biggest thing is, when I promote looking at blood work, make sure you're staying in your lane and know what you're looking at before you start giving your clients or yourself some sort of diagnosis or prescription for whatever it is that you're trying to cure.
I remember years ago, earlier in my career, and I like precision nutrition. I still think they're one of the best resources in the whole game. And there was a lot of talk about and precision led it. And I agreed with it at the time. And I still think there's value in being a concierge and being able not to be just the personal trainer, but being the resource for all of these other things, including being very experienced and knowledgeable about nutrition. And then as my career has gone on, I mean, yeah, I talk nutrition a lot with my clients. And I think every coach needs to be able to have those conversations. But when it gets into the deeper stuff, especially when it comes to anything that's, special populations and disease, I realize that my passion doesn't lie in the nuances of the nutrition. My passion is the training and the lifestyle stuff. Nutrition's adjacent, sure. And if I've got someone with special needs or those type of diseases, I want to defer that, refer it to a registered dietitian or a qualified medical professional, someone who actually knows what the fuck they're doing. And I mean, you make three people from the medical field, doctors, medical field, who I actually direct people to now. The others are Dr. Spencer Nadolski, who is I'm sorry, what is it? He's not an MD, he's an osteopath. Osteopathic doctor,
functional medicine guy, yeah.
But brilliant, evidence-based as they come, and probably the most knowledgeable guy I've seen when it comes to obesity medicine, and a really nuanced message. And then on top of that, there's my pal, Dr. Nick Nabuezi. He goes by the Fittest Doc. He was one of the speakers at Kenny Santucci's event where me, Don, Luca, we were all talking. And Nick is this like jacked CrossFitter, but he's a medical doctor. And he's more about, okay, nutrition, lifestyle versus, and again, it's a false dichotomy, the quote, pushing the drugs and all that sort of stuff. But I like Nick as a resource as well, because he's taken the time to educate himself. And now I want to direct people to you and your resources, because I think trainers, we need to know about this stuff, but I actually think personally that maybe a lot of trainers need to take a step back from the edges of trying to do it all, and then bring into play a network of professionals who are skilled at these disciplines. So that way, and yeah, there's arguments about scope. I think there's some fine lines with scope and whatever. Like, I don't prescribe nutrition to treat disease, right? That's a hard line when it comes to scope of practice. One of the myths is that, anyone who's not an RD cannot give a meal plan. That's a myth. That's actually not the truth. There's this belief that's out there in the US, and Goob, if anybody's familiar with Goob, go follow Goob. He's currently ripping apart one of the big US powerlifting federations, because they were covering about all sorts of crap. And he's really good at just ripping to shreds all these shitbag influencers and sex offenders in our industry. Goob is great. I got to meet him in Vegas. Go follow Goob. But he also, he took shots at two of my friends who both went on the podcast, so I love to death, because they both had said that it's illegal to provide meal plans. And Goob sort of like challenged us, because Goob actually has a background going to law school. Getting a little far afield here, but I'm not saying, hey, trainers, go and do a whole bunch of meal plans. I don't do them. I don't care. I don't want to do that shit. I hate doing it. It's time consuming, not interested. However, it's a technicality. But that being said, the real kill is, I'm not messing with like telling people what they should be doing with their nutrition. I have got clients who are diabetic and pre-diabetic and have some of these other sort of, they're special populations. And I love listening to them. I like having these conversations, but it's always, all right, what is the physician or what is the RD directing you to do? Cool. Now let's be a supportive entity for the lifestyle side of things, so that way they're better at executing on it.
It's interesting. This kind of leads into actually why I left the whole medical academia area, because my scope of practice was so confined to education in academia, that I felt I was doing a disservice to the people I actually wanted to reach, and that was the general population. So, I was 30 years in academia. Like, I didn't leave. I was 19 years old, and I stayed there till I was, 49 years old. And 16 years as a tenured professor. And then I went through the trenches before that, like 13 years of, post-grad education, and then climbing my way through the tenure track for 7 years and all that shit. And what I found out at the end of the road was that medical academia in general, is a big business, even though in Canada it's subsidized by the government. And they don't like you to educate the masses unless they're sitting in seats in their lecture halls and paying $9,000 a year to be there. So I was, it's funny because that's where I actually shifted gears. And I do, it's funny now because I don't have a scope of practice. but man, oh man, do I have a wide scope because of all the years I've done things, right? And so it feels it's such a wonderful thing now to be able to actually share that with the fitness community and with everybody, because I couldn't do it before. It was always behind the scenes, and that's why you'd never seen me before until the last year or so, because I could actually be out there now.
It
And
makes
so really, for me, this whole idea of scope of practice is, what does your insurance tell you? So that would be, that would be the if you have insurance through your governing body, then you have to act within that scope of practice. Otherwise, you're not going to be insured if something happens. But if you don't actually have a scope of practice, and you so basically you're not bound by any of those insurance claims or anything, then you can actually do what you feel you're educated enough in. And that's where the fine line comes into, like, knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And if you don't know it, educate yourself enough on it so that you now can become someone who knows. Pick a mentor, find someone to work with, those kind of things. Because the last thing you want to do is help someone who just had a kidney transplant and end up putting them into kidney failure because you got their potassium too high, or you got their proteins up too high, and their urea is up through the roof, or any of that kind of stuff.
Just came up yesterday. I've got a client, pre-diabetic, 55, great guy. And one of the things that came back on his labs is his potassium is too high. Now, so we're talking about like the foods where it's coming from, but that's one of those things where he's going to go back to the doc, and the doc is managing this whole situation. So I'm not telling him, all right, you got to do this, this, and this, and this. I just am enjoying learning about it and participating in the conversation. I got to shout out one more doc who's also great in nutrition, because I should not have forgot about Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, who's amazing as well. So,
absolutely, yep, friend of mine too.
Yeah, exactly. She's part of your guys' network at Dawn. And so I've actually been putting together my event for October in Edmonton. I haven't made any official announcement about the lineup yet, but I will tease you guys with this. This lineup is absolutely savage. And Dr. Gabrielle Lyon and Don Saladino are two of my speakers. Okay, so secured that. Don basically secured Gabby. I've met her at Kenny Santucci's Strong New York. She's so amazing. And so they're two of the people I got in this thing. So if anybody listening wants more info on this thing, like, this lineup is crazy. It's mostly Canadian speakers. I'm speaking as well. So there's one more. Shoot me a message on my social media. I will add you to the special email list for updates that I'll be sending out stuff as I confirm more. Right now, we're focused on the speaking things that are coming up. So honestly, you should probably let people know why they should watch us either at Kabuki Education Week or join us in person at the Real Coaches Summit, Vegas, March 6th and 7th.
Yeah, you definitely. So I'm not going to Kabuki.
I thought you were speaking at Kabuki. My apologies.
I'm not speaking at Kabuki. I've got other stuff I have to do during that. Yeah. But I'll be at Real Coaches Summit for sure. Definitely go to Kabuki though, and go to the Real Coaches Summit, because they're both excellent opportunities to kind of pick a mentor and get to know some people that you might want to work with. And it's a great opportunity for us as speakers to be able to speak with people to build our network. Because here's one for you. And I know this because I'm probably the oldest of the group. You don't get any younger. Okay. And this is a funny thing within academia too, by the way, the old, oh, fucking undergrads. Well, here's the thing. If you can't get into the mind of the undergrads, you're going to be irrelevant within 4 or 5 years, right? Within that term that they're there. So really, at the end of the day, for us as coaches and us as we're advancing in age, it's really, really important also for us to respect the younger guys up and coming and taking them on as mentees, because you'll also be elevating our profiles as we get older and go along. Think like Charles Poliquin, right? And this is and Charles Poliquin actually cracked the code back in the day when so he was a little about 5 or 6 years older than me. But he cracked the code back in the day when we were told, like, old people suck. We were told, like, all the music we listened to, were like, don't talk to old people, they're going to destroy your life. And so really cool is that he managed to crack the code with the younger folks. Like, when I went to Ottawa U and studied in kinesiology in the same department he did, strictly because he was there, and that was the thing, right? So really, it works both ways for mentors and mentees. So definitely go to these events, hobnob with people, go to the social events, talk to all the different folks within your cohort as well as within the speakers, because you never know what's going to unfold for you after that.
I'm excited about this one because it's in between two other things. I'm speaking at Raise the Bar the weekend before, and then I'm hanging out with Luca and Don and Kelsey Heenan at Luca's in Seattle for a private event that they're doing. Well, I mean, anybody can register for it, but there's a limit on it. And but Aram wanted me to come down to this. I said, okay, cool. It'll be a great time because I get to meet Jade Tata in person, who's been on my podcast before. I get to meet Sam Miller in person. I get to see Stan Efferding's there. I'll get to see him again. Allie Gilbert's a good friend. I'll get to hang out with her again. There's a whole bunch more people I'll get to meet for the first time. And I can only be there for the Monday, the first day, because I got to come back because then I got to turn around trip again. And my cat Ozzy, well, he doesn't like it when I travel, so a lot of stuff there. But either way, I'm really excited for this event. I'll get to meet and hang out with you. And if anybody is interested, just shoot me a message. So we obviously need to let people know where they can find you on your media.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at drdnjackson, and that's actually my handle for Twitter and Facebook and everything else. And if you want to check out my website, it's www.drdwaynejackson.com.
And I'm guessing there's, those things have links to your stuff with Prescript. They have stuff with Team HD and anything else that you're doing, right?
Absolutely. And if anybody's interested in gut health, Prescript, I'm releasing a gut health course. It's going to be evergreen, so it'll be a little cheaper than my current nutrition course. But it'll be up. You can take it whenever you want. We recorded it last summer. So it was quite a long thing, man. It was like 15 or 20 hours in the studio, a recording time in the studio. So it was probably weeks and weeks and weeks of cuts and whatever. So
Prescript stuff is great. Jordan and the team are amazing. So, I mean, that alone is a big gold star for you and anything that's coming out of there. So guys, check their work out. And everybody listening, thank you again. We dropped a few names like Don Saladino. Go back and listen to his recent episode, especially if you're someone who is finding my podcast for the first time through Dwayne. Just scroll through. I've got a lot of really big hitters from the industry. I'm really proud of the lineup. So you might find a reason to stick around. And I'm channeling a little bit Alex Hormozy here. I've been really binging Alex's stuff. And it's like, I don't do ads. This is something I enjoy because I get to hang out and talk with people like you and other friends of mine from the industry, but I get to share it with everyone else. So please share it with someone in your world. Okay. Share it with a coach that you feel like would get a lot of value out of my podcast. Share it on your social media. You can always tag me, shoot me a message if you have questions, leave a review, all that stuff. Find some little way to do something for free that supports this podcast. And that means the world to me. Dwayne, it's been great to have you on. I really appreciate having you. And we're going to chat a little off air. Everybody, I will be recording with Luca Hocevar shortly, and you'll get that episode next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.